I'm Kaylie Jones, and Kaylie Jones Books is all about dedicated writers taking a stand. I'm going to be interviewing Matthew McGevna, author of Little Beasts. Matt, how did Little Beasts come about as a novel?
Well, the novel sort of poured out of me not too long after my father had died back in 2003. It was just, I wanted to, I guess, try to capture some essence of what it was like growing up in the town that I grew up in. I grew up in a working class town on Long Island, and it started out just a germ of an idea, trying to trace back to when I was younger, some of the more immediate, larger memories or impressions that I had as a young person running around. And one of the two things that came to mind were sort of playing in the backwoods that was still standing at the time in the early '80s, and building forts. And then also this crime that had happened when I was really young, that my mother always used as a cautionary tale to tell me to avoid teenagers at all possible. You know, we would use the back roads and the side streets, my friends and I, and run around in the neighborhood together. And she would always say, you know, that boy would have been whatever age. It always fluctuated, sometimes older, sometimes younger. But it was this boy who had died brutally, was murdered by a group of older teenagers. They stuffed rocks down his throat in a town on the North Shore, about 20-30 miles west of where I grew up. And that story just always stuck with me. So I put those two basic germs of an idea and said, let me just start writing a scene about these young men running around, young boys running around in the woods together, play acting, role playing, and then see where it takes me from there. And it turned into this 500-page novel that was as expansive as it could possibly be. I kind of kitchen sinked everything.
That's pretty amazing that you wrote that whole book in 6 months. What I love about the book is that you don't judge anybody. The teenagers, even the ones who are violent and angry, have reason to be, and they're not bad children. They're just troubled, but they're not bad, and they're kind of ignored. They don't have anybody supervising them or helping them through their troubles.
Yeah, I think it's important in writing not to judge any of the characters. I think it's a bad idea to make angels and demons out of anybody. I think everybody has a little bit of complexity. There's reasons why people are where they're at. And that was one of the things that I was really fascinated with early on in the novel, was wanting, and I think I was really influenced by the Russian writers who do a wonderful job of sort of reversing roles and turning the tables. And so for my novel, the three boys who are terrorized by the teenagers, the slowest one and what they consider the weakest one becomes the strongest. And in the adult world, the alcoholic becomes a Christian, and the devout Christian turns to alcohol in his moment of crisis. And so I like the idea of reversing the tables with that, because I think human beings, I think sometimes there are people, and that's really the larger point of the novel, I think there are people in my town where I grew up who are living right on that edge, where one wrong thing or one bad thing could happen that would completely change the trajectory of their life. And a lot of that has to do with their socioeconomic status. They're sort of underrepresented, and they're just living right up to their paycheck. And if a car breaks down or a boiler explodes or something happens, or their son gets into some sort of legal trouble, it sinks, it bankrupts, and next thing you know, there's evictions and everything else that goes with it.
I think they're also underrepresented, and I'm so glad that you wrote this book about that kind of life where you're really living on the edge. I'm thrilled with this novel. I think it's absolutely luminous and brilliant. I know you have two small children at home. How do you work around them? How do you get your writing done when you have two kids running around?
When you have two kids running around, getting writing done is impossible almost. It's nearly impossible. In the laptop of life, children are like that spooling thing that never stops turning. One time while I was writing, I was really deep entranced in a section of a novel that I was working on, and I hadn't noticed that my son had actually climbed up the chair, got his leg over my shoulders, and was sitting on my head, and not till he was upside down, looking in my eyes, that I went, are you serious right now? Are we kidding? It's very, very hard to do it when they have kids that little. But I don't have a system, I don't have a program. My best bet is to try to work at night when I can, but I'm noticing now, even as I get older, that that's actually more difficult for me just because I finally sit down to write and I'm tired. But I find for people with children, my best advice would be to just don't stress yourself out and say, I have to write this day. Give yourself a time slot, I think, and that's the way it seems to be working a little bit, is to just say, okay, I'm gonna write only for an hour. And then if I can go to a library, or if it's while they're taking their nap, or while they're sleeping, or while their mother has them out somewhere, then that's the best way to go about it. But best of luck to you if you have kids and trying to do this thing.